the battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light. I'm going to use a word. I know we're covering a lot of ground. I'm going to bring it all together. I'm going to use a word that we haven't used. It means different things to different people. So let me use it and then I'll define it. It's a battle for our bodies, for our very humanness, Danny, because there is something within us that is so ancient and so beautiful and so powerful and so precious that nations will go to war against nations to keep us distracted from this essence of ourselves. Societies will be collapsed, climate will be engineered, pandemics will be unleashed, lies will be told. All those things are important, but they are distractions, they're diversions that are keeping us from this essence, this force. The human body is the link to something that is called our divinity. Now, divinity to many people has something to do with religion, but the contemporary definition, you look up contemporary definition, divinity, it simply is the ability to transcend perceived limitations, and that's it.
Right.
Transcend means to become more than perceived, and I love this. It means we may be living limits in our lives that aren't even true, limits that we've been indoctrinated to accept through family, society, religion, culture, science, those limits. So our ability to be the best version of ourselves is the goal, limiting us from the ability to be the best version of ourselves, limiting us from the ability to heal our own bodies, limiting us. So what is divinity? Divinity is the part of us that's timeless, it's ageless. It's where our imagination begins. It's where our creativity begins. It's where our love begins. Sympathy, empathy, compassion, healing, all are functions of human divinity.
Yeah.
If the powers that be want to change a world, we are much more vulnerable when we lose access to our divinity, when we lose access to our ability to heal our own bodies, to our ability to imagine and communicate what we're imagining and to create and innovate, all of those things. So there's a concerted effort right now, and I can share with you the science. What is it about our biology that actually links us to that divinity? We can get into that, but I just want to go through this step by step.
Well, I see what you're saying. It's been a theme on this show with recent guests that we've had on. There is obviously something going on with the human body. You can see it when you compare us, people living in metropolitan cities, and people that are surrounded by screens all day, inside underneath artificial light, doom scrolling on those dopamine slot machine iPhones that we have all day long, getting all of our information from these screens. And there's a very clear difference between us and people that are living in the Amazon. When you go down there and you're disconnected from all this stuff and you're not surrounded by this artificial light, all these non-native EMFs, all these screens everywhere, these blue light screens that are basically hijacking your circadian rhythm, there's something inside the body that many people have been on the show and described how it quite literally happens to them, and it's eye-opening, where there's these senses that are buried in us that open up once you get out there and you get away from all this civilization and technology. And that seems to be suppressed by everything I just talked about.
It's even more than that. That's everything you're saying. Yes, I lead groups. I just finished in 23. I finished my 49th tour in 47 years into Peru, every year. And when I'm down there with my groups in the high Andes for a couple of weeks, and then we come back, and we usually come back through a major population, either Miami or Dallas is how we come back. The world feels loud and heavy. And you have to really adapt to this world once you unplug from all that. But it goes beyond that. And with your permission, and I realize I'm talking a lot.
That's a good thing.
Well, no, I want to have this conversation, but can I share an experiment? It's a mind-blowing experiment, and it illustrates why our body is so important and why our body is the target of the evil. And this is a form of evil. When we are prevented from accessing our divinity, that is a form of evil. Can you see where that would be?
When we are prevented from accessing our body,
we prevented from accessing our divinity.
When we're prevented from accessing our divinity,
when you're prevented from
that is
accessing,
a form of evil, because the evil is somebody who wants to control us by blocking us from ourselves.
Divinity is the source of our imagination, creativity, our love, empathy, sympathy, compassion, healing, the very essence of our humanness. These are the values that we cherish, the characteristics that we cherish as a human. If those are veiled, we're still alive. But what kind of beings are
robots.
we? And that is a form of biological evil. There's psychological evil, there's biological evil. So let me share this experiment.
So who's behind this?
Let me share this experiment, and I think it'll make more sense. This is when I show this to live audiences, it's a mind blower. So the Salk Institute did this particular experiment. It's been replicated by other organizations since then. So if we Google this, it may come up with some other organizations. But it was Northern California at the Salk Institute. What they did was they took human neurons separate from a body. So they put them in a petri dish. So here's some cells in a petri dish, not connected to a body.
Okay.
And they had a special computer chip where they could take, I think people are familiar, when you look at a neuron, it's got little dendrites, these little tentacles that look like they're coming off the neuron. They were able to hook those into the port of a computer chip. So now you've got a machine cell interface. So the neuron is actually connected to a special computer chip. All right?
Wow.
But it's not connected to a body. Okay? Now, they took this computer chip and they put it into a computer that was loaded with a primitive video game that came out in 1972 called Pong. I don't know if you remember.
Of course.
Pong, if our viewers aren't familiar with it, it was just a very primitive, like a tennis game. And I remember it's so primitive compared to now because we're so sophisticated with this. But back then, it was the thing. I mean, people would spend hours playing this game. So here's what happened. They hooked the chip into this machine loaded with Pong. These neurons began playing the game of Pong. And the longer they played, the better they got. They were learning. So the question, there's no human attached. How does a neuron in a petri dish know how to play the game of Pong? The answer to that question is why this conversation is so important.
Okay, so this is the article right here, published 2022.
I don't know if that's the article. That may be an article.
Brain cells in a lab dish learn to play Pong and offer a window onto intelligence. A dish of living brain cells has learned to play the 1970s arcade game Pong. About 800,000 cells linked to a computer gradually learn to sense the position of the game's electronic ball and control the virtual paddle, a team reports in the journal Neuron. Whoa.
All right, see, even they're missing the point. Because the question is, how does a cell even know to begin to respond, to play this game?
Right.
Okay, so here's the point. Here's the point they're missing. Where science has taken a big turn is we've always thought of our bodies as soft, sticky, gooey, wet, mushy cells and biological stuff. In recent years now, scientists are beginning to look at the human body from an IT perspective, information technology. And the discoveries are not being published in the biology text. They're coming out in IEEE and these obscure engineering journals, the Journal of Advanced Computing Technology. That's where they're showing the study. And nobody, I mean, my genre, people aren't reading them, and I don't know about our viewers. So you're not seeing a lot of this stuff. Here is what they found. They literally are saying now that human DNA is a fractal antenna. What that means, fractal antenna, it's not just tuned to one thing, it is tuned to broad spectrum information across a vast array of bandwidths, okay? It's not just tuned to one. Human cells are also antenna. Human neurons are also antenna, all right? The antenna in that petri dish, the instructions for the Pong are not in the neurons. The neurons are the antenna, the biological antenna that tune to the place, the information in the field that underlies all existence, the field that was revealed CERN Superconducting Super Collider, 2012, announced that there is a field underlying all existence. They now acknowledge that.
Like a field of consciousness?
Well, some people call it consciousness. It's information. It's a field of information. And now it's a very different way of thinking. And I got to tell you, this is not my training. I was not trained to think this way. I had to cross traditional boundaries and open my mind to follow the data to where it's leading rather than trying to force the data into a pre-existing story.
Right.
All right. And that's important for all of us. So the neurons in the Petri dish are in communication with a field. Pong was played by millions of people for so long. There is a vibratory essence held in that field. Some spiritual traditions call it the Akashic Records, or you call it the Matrix or the Divine Matrix or the Planck vibratory field or the 0 point field or whatever you want to call it. There's all, depending on the application, people give it different names. The bottom line is that we are a field of, it's not out there. We are part of that field. And the neurons in that Petri dish are tuned to the place in the field where Pong lives. And the longer they play, that's how they are able to get better and better. The neurons in the Petri dish are tuned to Pong in the field. The neurons in our brain and in our heart, in the cells of our body, are tuned to the field that holds our divinity. When our biology is replaced, we no longer have those antennae communicating with that part of the field, and we become lost, we become frightened, we become fearful, and we become vulnerable to the control and the agendas of others. And this, I think, there's so many ways to go about this, Danny. If people are biblically inclined, we've always heard that the body is the temple. 1 Corinthians 3, I think it's 3:16. Know ye not that your body is the temple of God, that God dwells within your body? And people say, okay, cool. This is so interesting as an archaeologist studying ancient temples, whether it's in the Middle East or it's in Asia or Greece or wherever. Ancient temples, when they were built, they were always built in layers. And the innermost sanctum, the innermost room, was always the place where the greatest wisdom and the highest knowledge and the deepest secrets were kept. It was called the Holy of Holies in the temples. If we are a temple, we have not one Holy of Holies, but we have 50 trillion Holy of Holies, because the nucleus of every cell holds the DNA that tunes us to our divinity. That is our Holy of Holies. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.